Oh my gosh, I'm breaking my promise. I promised you I would not talk about politics, but the coronavirus has kind of changed everything. Who knows? Maybe it's even good. We're going to talk about it right here on this episode of Cooper Stuff. Cooper Stuff! What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Cooper Stuff. Thanks for joining us. First of all, if you do not subscribe to Cooper Stuff, you need to do that, boy. Son, jump on there. iTunes, we're on Spotify. Finally, I'm sorry it took so long. YouTube, and so excited to announce, finally got my website up and running. Woo! So check it out. Subscribe to us and let me know what you think. I love reading people's comments. So I told you guys I'm kind of breaking a promise a little bit here. In some senses, I'm sorry. In some senses, I'm not. Here's the thing. Cooper Stuff doesn't want to be about politics. I love politics personally. The reason I don't want to be about politics is because to me, politics is not what I would call an ultimate thing, all right? I care about my faith in God. I care about religious studies, things like that, culture studies, a million times more than politics, because even though I enjoy politics, I don't believe that politics will change your heart. I believe that only faith in God can do so. So it's not that I don't want to make people mad. It's not worth making people mad over this issue is what I'm trying to say, all right? But I think that we can do this thing on Cooper Stuff, and who knows, people might even love it. People might even love it. But I think we can do this without making people actually upset, because if you're hoping this episode is going to be me saying all the things I think about politics and you hope you agree with it and you want me to go off on folks, then you'll be disappointed. This isn't really about what I think per se. I want to talk about some stuff that I see in everyday life happening right now because it is so poignant. It's a really incredible time for a culture study, so people can kind of understand in a really simple version of what American politics kind of is and how people are on the dividing lines of those things. So look, if something I say makes you real super mad or you disagree, feel free to say in the comments. I love reading the comments. They don't bother me if people agree or disagree. But I would like to ask people on Cooper Stuff, please don't start yelling at other people if you disagree about politics, because that's not really what it is. I think we should have lively disagreement. It's totally fine. First, let me say this. I didn't even know until really a few years ago, until this latest presidential election in 2016, I didn't know that people got so mad about politics. I mean, I've been involved in politics for a long time, but when I grew up, I mean, we fought about it a little bit, but what people didn't like lose friendships over politics. And I really started noticing that happen in our last election in America, during the Trump, Hillary stuff. So people, I started noticing during that election were like, I mean, people are losing friends. I mean, family members splitting apart over this. That's a real bummer to me. I don't really like it. Especially, I don't think that should happen in the church. And we're going to talk about that a little bit today. So I guess the three things I want to hit on. Number one, I'm going to talk about the current time we're in with coronavirus, because it's a really cool culture study that for some people they might go, oh, I see the differences between what it means to be conservative or liberal. Number two, I want to talk about maybe what you might want to call the evangelical vote, as they call it, what typical evangelicals have believed, and maybe why that is as it relates. And then the third thing I want to mention is going to be on the way that we, as people of faith, come to terms with how we make up our minds about what we believe about politics, because I do think a lot of those things are changing, okay? So, let's just jump right into this. Here's the culture study thing that I thought would be easy. So most people know we have two major parties. We have Republicans and Democrats. So for this, I'm going to talk about the people on the right, which is what we typically call Republicans. But there's a lot of people in between, and they have various degrees of extreme conservatism and things like that. So I'm going to call it conservatives on the right, liberals on the left, as opposed to breaking it into Republicans and Democrats, all right? So here's the culture study. As we're dealing with coronavirus, by the way, we have a lot of people watching this that are not in America. I don't know what's happening in your country besides what I see on television and news reports and read. So I don't have a very great idea about that. So I'm talking about America during this thing. So you may have noticed, if you've been keeping up with the news, there are two major different ways that people are wondering how we come out of this, coronavirus lockdown. One group of people you see is very much like, tearing at the bit, whatever you want to call it. I'm ready for this lockdown to be done. We need to go back to work. We're tired of it. There's a lot of people you've seen, I'm sure, on TV, Michigan and Ohio. I can't remember right now. Georgia is having a bunch of drama about a lot of other things, even though they're actually beginning to open slowly now. But you're seeing like picketing, or you're seeing people, even with guns, like almost looks like militia style, if you will, in cities demanding to be reopened, demanding for us to have our jobs. I saw somebody on the news in New York City who actually was coming in and opening up his store, and he was just refusing to not open it. His point of view being that that they can't shut his store down, they're hurting his livelihood. And and the police came, and you're seeing lots of crazy stuff right now. And there's even an argument on this same group of people that I'm saying that are picketing and protesting, saying we need to be opening right now. We want to make decisions on our own lives. They even have a lot of people that are protesting because in certain cities, as you may have seen, they're saying, hey, we wanted to go to a church service and stay in our car. It was almost like a drive-through church service. I don't know if you saw that on Easter. I can't remember what state that was, whether that was Ohio or Kentucky or something, or Virginia. I don't remember where. And they wanted to have like a drive-through church service for Easter. You stay in your car and you listen, like on the radio to the guy preach. The police came and were shutting them down. A lot of people were mad because they're saying, hey, you still can go to a liquor store. You can walk into a liquor store and buy lottery tickets and booze. In some of these states, you can go buy legal marijuana, but you can't go and sit in your car at a church service. There's a lot of people that are beginning to say, hey, this is shady. This isn't freedom. So you have that group of people. We would call those group of people are tending to be on the conservative side, okay? And not everybody, so people out there might be like, that's not exactly accurate. This is a very big generalization. You have one group of Americans that want it that way, and they are tending to be on the conservative side of politics. Then there's the other kind of people. What are the other people like? They right now are tending to be the people that are saying we cannot open the government right now because every life matters, and we're endangering other people. We're not only endangering other people, we're especially endangering people like in minorities or older people, which could be like a form of ageism, if you will. And that group of people also kind of says we're not really believing the science. If we open up now, you guys are not believing in science, so you're like a science denier. What else is that group of people? I think they basically feel like we need to be putting people before like jobs. So their feeling would be, if you are endangering people's lives just because you want to go back to work, then it looks like you're caring about money more than you're caring about jobs. And that is a very kind of inhumane way to look at it from their view. That is tending to be more on the liberal side. And the reason I'm giving you this thing is because a lot of people don't know the difference between conservatism and liberalism. And we live in a society that is very what we would call like deconstructionist, if you will. And what people are trying to do now is kind of tear down all of the traditional thinking about anything. That could be about history. You see it a lot in like revisionist history is what a lot of people call it, which is when you go back and you reinterpret things that happen in history through the lens of a modern view. So it'd be like in 2020, going back and reading history from a period of like, say, slavery, and without understanding the time period reading it through your lens today and saying this must have been what those people were thinking. And you can do that in all sorts of things. History, you could do that in politics. People do that in religion. We are doing that in Christianity. We're world history. We're doing it pretty much in everything. That is what I would say one of the major defining things about our culture today is that we are deconstructionists in general. So, in this deconstructionist thing that we are doing, what I see a lot of people doing, especially in Christianity, I think it's more than just Christianity, but I probably see it through the lens of Christianity because that's what I care about the most, is that we are trying to break down all the the traditions. It's almost like we're trying to boil things down to get to the simplest terms of a thing, and that's anything, okay? When I say a thing, it could be politics, religion, history, etc. We're trying to boil it down, but we are actually not boiling it all the way down, all right? So how I would say it would be like this. It would be like saying we have a big building and we're going to, deconstruct this entire building to find out what's at the foundations. It would be like taking a wrecking ball and, crushing the roof and the concrete, and all that's left would be like the wooden, slats and the wooden studs, and then saying, okay, we've crashed this, we've deconstructed this to the foundation, and this is what it looks like. Well, the problem is that studs is not the foundation. The foundation is going to be the concrete. So you have to then deconstruct and knock down all of the slats, all of the studs, all of the flooring, blah, 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 so on and so on. And then at the very bottom, you actually get down to the concrete. In our deconstructionist culture, we are not boiling things down far enough. And so that is why I think this is a really good culture exercise. So let me explain in dummy terms, which is what I understand everything in, why these two groups of people are seeing how we should be responding to the coronavirus. And this is the reason I say people shouldn't actually be mad at what I'm saying. I'm just trying to kind of say what different groups of people are thinking, okay? I'm not slamming anybody for anything, even though I have my own particular views that I'll share here or there, possibly. So, on the one side, as I told you, you have the people that are saying we need to open up right now. There are different levels of extremes in that, okay? There's even a conspiracy theory side to the people that are saying we don't open up, you can't tell me what to do, you can't rule me, even the militia style guns, what have you. The really extreme side of that would be the conspiracy theory kind of side, which would say that government has created this virus in order to rule over it. They're trying to control us with this virus. All right, there's a lot of people that think that would be a little bit more on the extreme right, okay? But the reason that all this exists is because conservatism in general is built on a social science philosophy. All politics is philosophy, and a lot of people don't know that politics is not just like something you choose. I believe in that kind of taxing. I believe in that sort of welfare program. I believe in open borders. I believe that we should help the poor. You don't just pick out certain things that you think about stuff and then go, that's my philosophy. All politics in government is built on actual philosophies. And the philosophy of conservatism in America is one that believes that government cannot meet your needs. Government can't, what do you want to say? The government is not there to supply you with actual rights. The government is there to protect your natural rights. So in other words, I have the right to free speech. I mean, that is something I'm given from the government, but really what it is that that in America, the founders believe that free speech is a natural right. And that comes from the philosopher John Locke. Centuries ago, he called it the natural rights of man, okay? So what that means is that God has given us natural rights to life, liberty. In America, we call it pursuit of happiness. John Locke called it something else. I think that he actually called it to land, if I remember my philosophy correctly. But the point is that John Locke said, no, these aren't given from the government, these are given from God. And so the founders of America, when they were putting this together, they were very influenced by lots of philosophers, John Locke being one of them. Basically what they're saying is this, is that government should just protect your natural rights, and other than that, government should absolutely just stay out of your life. And that's why you hear conservatives say they want little government. You ever heard that? We want little government involvement. We don't want them telling us what to do. We don't want them getting involved in our religion, so on and so forth, because conservatives believe that government is just bad. And it is based on a philosophy that mankind is actually bad. Mankind left to his own devices will just serve himself and selfishness, and he'll always look out for himself. So conservatives want very small government. That is the idea. And that is the reason that people on the conservative side right now are tending to be the ones demanding for the government to be reopened. In other words, there's a growing feeling, not just among conservatives right now in this current time, even on a lot of other people as well, by the way. But conservatives are thinking, you know what? The government is saying, no, you can't go to a drive-through church meeting. They're saying, no, you can't get together with, your extended family with 10 or 15 people, but they are allowing you to go buy marijuana. They are allowing you to go to a liquor store. A lot of conservatives are saying something is wrong with this, and I don't like it. They are also saying that we don't think that the government should be able to tell us what is in our best interest. And the reason they don't think the government should be able to do that is because we don't trust that they're saying we don't trust the government to ever know anything, and we think the government will only want to serve its own purposes, but the government exists to keep us free, our civil liberties, for me to worship the way I want to worship and say what I want to say. And that is the reason that conservatives are pushing so hard to open the government. If you move over to the left, in liberalism, there will be lots of different philosophies, of course, of that movement. But a lot of liberal philosophy, they would say that we believe in a society of egalitarianism. And egalitarianism is basically just equality. All right, everybody needs to be exactly equal. And I'm not trying to say that every liberal in America is socialist by any means. That's untrue. But in other words, if you understand the far, far left of what socialism is, then it kind of gives you an idea of what egalitarianism is, even though it looks very different in America than what you would call like a socialist republic, okay? So I'm not claiming that all liberals are socialists. That's not true. But that kind of egalitarian society of equals where everyone is taken care of and the government exists to supply our needs. And the government exists to bring justice. And the government exists to kind of bring morality. So again, that's kind of the difference between the two. Conservatives say, no, the government doesn't exist to give me morality. I can choose what is morality for me as long as I don't hurt other people. Conservatives obviously believe in law and order. We're not saying that. But we're talking about for what I believe in myself. On the liberal side, it can tend to be more like we look to the government in order to tell us how we can more justly feed the poor, how we can more justly help our neighbor, things like that, okay? So these are two different sort of philosophies that I think are a pretty good way to really look at the coronavirus right now and see what they are. On the liberal side, on the left, for instance, I'm hearing right now a lot of people, even some friends of mine, okay? And the reason I say even friends of mine is because I don't agree with what I'm about to say, but some of my friends do. So my friends on the left and liberals are saying that we cannot open up the government right now because all that will do will hurt minorities. They're saying basically that this is to do with race and ageism and sexism and racism. That would be another thing that I would say about liberals in general versus conservatives. Liberals tend to see the world and their social philosophy. that's, you know, the bedrock of what they believe, tend to see the world through a lens of like identity. And what identity means is the color of your skin, your gender, you know, whatever, your sex, your age, and yada, yada, yada. Whereas conservatives tend to see people as individuals, because conservatives kind of had that kind of like American revolutionary spirit, if you will, that revolutionary, you know, kind of rebellion. Like, the government is bad, we don't want them involved, I can make a decision about my life and I don't want them involved in it. That's kind of bred in the bone of conservatives, okay, is that revolutionary spirit of individualism. In liberalism, you tend to have seeing everything through egalitarianism, as I said, through lens of equality. And so when that happens, they tend to break everybody into identity groups, okay? If you watch politics, that's the definition of identity politics. That's what they call it, is when you break everybody up into lens. So some of my friends are saying, if we open up the government, all that is going to do is disproportionately hurt minorities, minorities that maybe are, you know, poor. Well, I think one of the biggest reasons is because of this, and this is true. Statistically, the coronavirus in America is disproportionately hurting blacks more than whites, and that is true. There's a lot of reasons for that. But I think that the interpretation of the data is why you see the conservative groups that believe what they believe and the liberal groups believe what they believe. If you want to do conspiracy theories, I already shared the conspiracy theory on the right that conservatives have, that the government is trying to control us and the government is evil. The conspiracy theory on the left, whether you believe it or not, would be that really this is disproportionately hurting minorities, it's hurting blacks, it's hurting women, and conservatives don't mind opening up the government because if it kills a bunch more black people, then conservatives don't care. All right, so I obviously very much disagree with that. I think that's kind of highly unfair. And one of the reasons I think that's unfair would just be because if you look at numbers in Europe, even though the numbers of blacks in Europe, they don't have as many black people as we have in America, but it is also disproportionately, coronavirus is disproportionately killing blacks in Europe in a similar way, and Europe does not have the, you know, original sin of slavery that America has. In other words, this is about underlying conditions. It's probably to do with a little bit of genetics and DNA and things like that, that would lead more to underlying effects. Hypertension, heart disease, I can't remember, asthma, things like that. Diabetes, I believe, if I remember my reading correctly. I love statistics. So anyway, my point is, that's what I think about that. If you disagree, that's totally fine with me. That's just the way that I've interpreted the data. So those are the way that those two groups think. And how does that how does that relate to faith in today? Why am I talking about it? I think it's a really great cultural exercise. You get an idea of what different people believe and the philosophies behind it. Then we have to look at how does that affect my Christianity. A lot of Christians now are what I would call deconstructing right now. They want to deconstruct our faith because maybe what we've been told is a lie. There's a lot of that happening right now. If I'm going to go into this, then I need to mention right quick, if I can, what evangelicals have typically thought about things. I gotta get a drink of my Dr. Pepper. I found a place with DP. Look at that, McDonald's. Now, I'm not a McDonald's fan, by the way, but you know what? McDonald's was doing a promotion to give free meals to emergency workers here in town. I thought that's pretty awesome stuff. So because of that, I got to support McDonald's here. I thought that was a pretty cool thing. Evangelicals. You got to talk about what the evangelical vote is because it gives you an idea of why Christians want to deconstruct our faith. Not all Christians, but you get my point. All right, the evangelical vote in politics is extremely powerful. It would be to a similar power level as in politics in America is what they call the black vote. Historically, the black vote has gone almost complete majority to Democrats and liberals. historically, the evangelical vote has gone to conservatives. And so people want to know why that is. For one thing, as I already told you, the idea of conservatism is one that says we do not want the government telling us how to live our lives because that is a right given to us by God, not by the government. And again, that's based on John Locke's rights of man. In other words, that's not based on the Bible. That's based on John Locke philosophy. But obviously, the Christians and people of faith have liked that because what it means is that the government doesn't get involved in my worship. That can be a really ugly thing. That is the reason that if you go the opposite direction, again, I'm not saying that all liberals agree with this because I know they don't in America. If you go to the extreme left, what you are going to get is extreme socialism into communism, and that leads to the destruction of religion. And a lot of socialists say, no, it doesn't. It always has done. So we can kind of get into philosophy of why that is and maybe why it could not, but it has done. Karl Marx himself wanted it gone. Okay, so Marxism, Leninism, Stalinism, that has gotten rid of religion altogether. So a lot of conservatives agree because Christians, with conservatism because they say government stays out of religion. They do not tell me what I can believe and how I can believe it, and they don't get involved in my personal life, and I like that. And there's a little bit of a similarity between the revolutionary individualism of the American Revolution and what it means to be a person of faith in a world that denies Jesus, I guess. There's like a bit of a similarity in the spirit of that thing. Now, evangelicals sometimes, politics is really complex, but evangelicals sometimes just go, all right, you know what? All that I can boil it down to is this: freedom of religion. And one major issue for evangelicals, everybody probably knows, which is the abortion issues, the pro-life movement. Most evangelicals have tended to be pro-life. They have seen in the conservative movement that they want to protect those rights because they believe that God has given us natural rights, and that is for every human, including babies that are not yet born. So a lot of the times the pro-life movement has kind of combined with the evangelicals in sort of an unbreakable bond, if you will. That is obviously a really, big thing. So what we have now is that, actually, let me say a few more things about evangelicals because I think there's a couple of good points that get overlooked, okay? A lot of people don't understand that the history of America was built on there were a lot of great things about the history of America. I'm actually reading through a really famous book, a couple hundred years old, Tocqueville's Democracy in America. Tocqueville was a French writer, and he came to America to see what it was all about, and he wrote a really famous history book. I'm reading through it. And he talks about what he would consider almost the obsessive work ethic of the early Americans. And these Americans were really proud of it. They would work all day long, barely sleep, get up and work all day long, and they prided themselves on that work ethic. And obviously, there's a whole discussion there that can happen on whether people really think that that's always really healthy or not. I particularly kind of like it because I'm kind of into that. But the point I'm going to make is this, that a lot of evangelicals believe in hard work ethic because they believe that was not just an American thing, but that is something that the Bible teaches. So there's this, feeling of if you're in the community of God and you're unwilling to work, then you shouldn't be allowed to eat. There's a lot in the Bible about not being a sluggard, not being a sloth, things like that. So evangelicals have tended to kind of believe in a lot of those things. Also, evangelicals have also believed that authority comes from God. And so whoever is put in authority, even if they were voted on by us Americans for a president or a state senator or whatever, we believe that we are responsible for the leaders we are being put in office. So there's an element of personal morality that was always important to evangelicals when it comes to voting for president. This obviously leads probably a lot of people to a big question, which is one of the reasons we are deconstructing within Christianity in terms of politics right now, which is a lot of evangelicals voted for President Trump. And all of a sudden in President Trump, you had a conservative that was fighting for religious rights who in his own life was very far from a moral person. President Trump is not somebody that you'd want to tell your kids to go hang out with and do as he does. So now we have a lot of very big questions. So, where are we at now? I was explaining the evangelical vote in order that I can say, this is the reason we are deconstructing everything as Christians. A lot of Christians are going, all right, I've been told my whole life that I'm a Christian. I have to vote evangelical vote. I have to be conservative because of this. What about all these other questions? What about the liberal point of view that says we should be taking care of the poor more? A lot of Christians now are probably more motivated by what we would call the social gospel than maybe the traditional view of the gospel. Meaning the gospel is the good news of Christ, repent and be born again. The social gospel is that Christians should be helping the poor, helping the least of these. We should be showing our love to the world through social justice, all right? So now there's a lot of deconstruction happening in that. And we have to ask ourselves some really big questions. And I'm not here to tell you how you should think. I'm not here to tell you how you should vote. I wonder if it might be worth talking about some more of these political things. And at the very end, I'm going to end with a poll. I want to know, do you guys want to talk more about politics and discuss the issues at hand? Or would you rather Cooper Stuff stay away from that precisely for the reason that it does divide people? Because Cooper Stuff is not meant to be a political... I don't mind touching on political issues and explaining things, but the last thing I want to do is start dividing Christians for politics, because that is not an ultimate thing to me. So at the end, I would like to have a poll. I would like to know, do you guys want to talk about more about politics in what I would consider to be a civil way or not? We don't have to. Yes or no? You tell me, people. But what I wanted to say is this. I don't want to tell you how you should vote. I don't want to tell you if you, as a person of faith, have to be a conservative or a liberal. Or even if you are, for instance, conservative, doesn't mean you have to vote for President Trump. In other words, I have a lot of Christian friends. One of my best friends that it says, you know what, I cannot vote for a liberal, but I cannot vote for Trump. He said, I would feel, how did he say it? I would feel guilty before the Lord. That's how he said to me, guilty before the Lord for putting my stamp of approval on someone who is personally an immoral person. That's his perspective, all right? Not mine. Nobody yell at me. I really don't want to say what I think about all this right now. I just want to give you some ideas to think about. So, when you are weighing where you fall on these political lines, it's getting extremely complex. What I'm saying is that, again, if you want to deconstruct all the way down to the foundations, then I think that you need to do some understanding of the philosophies behind. Which philosophy do you line up with? Let me give you an example. In marriage, when me and Corey made a covenant to each other, we made a decision that in this covenant, and it wasn't just between me and Corey, we're making a covenant before God. The Bible says a three-chord strand is not easily broken, I think is the scripture. The point is it's me, Corey, God. We are all in covenant. Me and Corey now are being joined together as one, right? The two becomes one. And in that covenant, divorce will never be an option. And it doesn't matter if we fight a ton. Doesn't matter if she gets mad at me about how I spend money, or I get mad at her about how she spends money. Doesn't matter if we're yelling at each other. What we do know is that we will not divorce. That is the foundation. Part of that foundation for me and Corey, maybe not for everybody listening, but for me and Corey, part of that foundation is we will never get so mad at each other that someone has to go sleep on the couch, all right? Because, yeah, we might be a little mad when we go to sleep, but we will not go to bed angry in a true sense, meaning angry like, I don't know if we're going to make it tomorrow, kind of angry, all right? I will apologize. She will apologize. We will sleep in the same bed. That was just like our rule, okay? When you have that foundation, then you can build on top of it all the other stuff. And when you're deconstructing something, if you only deconstruct a little bit, as I said earlier, to the wooden studs and the wooden slats, then you are not actually getting to the bottom of the philosophy. And I would suggest, for people who care, if you want to do that with politics and what it means to be a person of faith in politics, I would say find out what the philosophy is rather than boiling it down to terms that are actually, it's not that they're too simple, it's that they're not correct. Let me give you an example. Going back to coronavirus, if somebody wanted to boil it down and say, basically, here's what's going on, conservatives don't trust the government and liberals want the government to take everything over. That wouldn't actually be exactly fair. There may be a little bit of truth in some of that, but there are a lot of liberals that don't want them to take it over, but they are maybe just believing something in a different way that you're believing. Some conservatives might say, that's a completely unfair statement because it's not that I don't trust the government. I just would prefer myself to be able to weigh the risk and the reward. I would like to read this science and for myself say, I feel comfortable going to the grocery store without my mask on. I don't want the government to tell me because I think that I am smarter than the government. That's what a lot of conservatives say. So it's not really a fair way to boil it down. On the liberal side, another way that is not fair, but it's something that you hear a lot, would be in this situation, okay, liberals care more about people, and that's why conservatives want to open the government back up. Conservatives want to open up because they don't really care about people, they just want the money. I don't think that's a really fair statement for lots of reasons, and one of those I will explain is because this is going on in my head for the last month. When you understand economics, it doesn't take long for you to realize that coronavirus will kill a whole lot of people. Starvation will also kill a whole lot of other people. I've been saying this for weeks to a lot of my friends, just saying, I don't really know what the answer is, but at some point, they'll find, certainly people will have to realize that it's not just that this government has to open up because we all need money. It's that the government has to open up because people are going to need to eat. All right. The UN just put out their statistics. I can't remember exactly what they were, but it was something like that 130 million people could die of starvation by the end of this coronavirus time. That's 130 million people. And guess what? If 130 million people are dying of starvation, that means there's millions more who are in threat of dying. Does that make sense? In other words, it's not like 130 million people died from starvation and no one else is starving to death. That means there's going to be millions and millions more people who have to ration their food, who don't know how they're going to eat. I talked to a friend recently in well, I don't want to say what country they are in case people get mad, but in another country, and he said, yeah, our government shut everything down. People are starving. We don't know what's going to happen. They're shut down for the rest of the year. We hope they don't die. Don't know how they're going to eat. This is a real thing. Even in America, just this week, I read yesterday that we are beginning to have a meat shortage in America. Did you ever imagine a meat shortage in America? I never even... I hope there's not a Dr. Pepper shortage. I could do without the meat, but I need the DP, okay? So, in other words, it's not a fair statement to say that just because some people want to open up the government means they don't care about people. So, what I would say to people of faith is this: understand the differences in the philosophies of the two sides, and then be willing to have some difficult, complex conversations about the various policies and how those policies fit into your faith. What you are going to find in politics as a Christian, you're going to find that you're going to actually have to weigh a lot of incredible things. I would like to give you some of those things, then we're going to end, and I don't want to tell you what I think about it. If you want to talk about some of those things in the future, then you know how to vote on the poll. I'm going to give this to you, then we're going to end. When you're looking at this, the things that you will have to weigh as a Christian, your underlying philosophy between conservatism and liberalism. Do you believe that government exists to protect my natural rights that God's given me? Or do you think that government exists to create an egalitarian society, even at the expense of you losing some of your personal civil liberties? You got to make that decision. Then you have to decide you got to take your blinders off and find out, if I follow that philosophy through, what is going to be the end of that philosophy? How can we possibly know the end of that philosophy? It's called history. You can read various political things in history. Then you have to weigh the various social policies, because as Christians, we are called to help the poor. We are called to love the foreigner, right? The immigrant that comes into the society that has no job and has no money. We're called to do that. How do you implement that into your faith? Well, some people say, well, liberals do that a whole lot better than conservatives, so I'm going to vote liberal. But you have to weigh that with the idea of, the Bible doesn't tell us that the government is supposed to take care of the poor person. The Bible tells us that you and me are supposed to take care of the poor person. So you have to weigh, do I think that that is an issue of a government policy to do that? Or is that a heart condition and I put my money where my mouth is? Those are big things to weigh. Then you have to weigh the element that I'm laughing about. I'm laughing about it. I might make people mad. I'm sorry. But here's the reason I'm laughing about it. Because it used to only be Christian people who were always honestly going on and on and on about the personal morality of a president. The reason I'm laughing about it, I'm a little cynical about it, because when I was in college is when Bill Clinton was being impeached with all of his sexual episodes. Monica Lewinsky and all of that stuff was going on. And when I was in college, it was all of the liberal people that were saying, all you Christians, all you do is judge people. His personal life is none of your business. It doesn't matter if he has sex with other people or not. That's not your business. You're just a judgmental, mean Christian. And so it was the evangelicals who were being really chastised by people for caring so much about people's personal lives. And we were told it's about their policies. So their argument was that Bill Clinton's policies helped women, even though his personal life, I guess, hurt women. His policies helped women. They were weighing that. And so I guess the irony of the thing is, here we are 20 years later, and the roles are reversed. In President Trump, you have what a lot of evangelicals say are policies that we can get behind as evangelicals, but his own life is a little shady, and how does that work? I'm not telling you what you should think as a Christian. I'm just telling you what, the evangelical vote for Trump was like 80% or something like that. I don't know what it was. It was very high. And some people are saying that may change this go around. We just don't know. So you're going to find yourself having to weigh all of these incredible things. And that's why I say to boil it down to a simple thing of just saying, Christians are supposed to help the poor, so I'm going to vote this. Or Christians are supposed to do this, so I'm going to do this. I think you're going to find it's extremely complex. Okay, so that is an introduction to politics based on our incredible social moment in history of the coronavirus lockdown and how we are going back into society. It's actually a really good culture study, so we can find out what's up. It's pretty crazy time. So follow Cooper Stuff. Thanks so much. Send a comment if you disagree with something I said. All you got to do is say so. I will never get mad at people for disagreeing with me. And let's go out in peace and be safe, everybody. Later. Cooper Stuff!